Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. I don't know if this is exactly a kit bash showcase or what I'm gonna call this in the end, but um, basically this is gonna be some things that I did with the new Leviathan box set. Because as great as the new Tyranids are, and as happy as we all are with getting some new models for a much beloved faction, as a great man once said, things are good, but they can be better. So, starting off with the first little conversion from the box set, and I just want to reiterate. So, everything I've done here doesn't require any additional parts. It's all things from the box, and that was one of my ideas going in. I've had all this planned out for quite a while. I don't want to toot my own horn, but definitely at least some of what you see here, I think I was one of the very first people to do it, and I know certainly a couple of these things got a lot of love online, and a lot of people saying that they were going to copy it and do their own sort of thing. So with that said, I'm going to start with kind of like the most simple and work my way up. So with that out of the way, I'm going to move these aside and focus on these little guys. So these are of course the new rippers that came with the new termagants. As is tradition, when you get a pack of 10 termagants, it comes with a single ripper base. Now the problem is you need 3 of them to make a unit, and you only get 2 in the box set. Now there's a couple things going on here. So one, it's really cool that they do that still, and they're including this extra little model in a unit that you're buying, which would be the termagants. But the problem is, and this is further amplified, one, the Tyranid side versus the Space Marine side. Like if you and 2 friends are just getting into Warhammer and you pick this up, you want to play a game, the Tyranids actually are quite a bit under strength versus the Space Marines. And you have these models that you can't really use because you need 3 to make a squad. So I don't have any plans of buying another squad of Termagants anytime soon. I'm happy with the 20 that I have. So it seemed kind of silly to, unless I was just going to use them to decorate bases, to not use the Rippers. But then I got thinking, well, Rippers are often shown in the lore to be like diving and burrowing through the ground and the muck and the sludge of the battlefield and bursting out in a swarm to get people. So you got 4 per base. And so you've got 8 models between 2 bases that come with this kit. So I figure if you just chop some of them up and make it look like they were burrowing, it's easy enough to fill up a 3rd base. Now I say that, and of course I don't even have the 3rd base here. I just did these before I made the video, and I just have been too lazy to go grab a spare base. That's the only thing you need. So I guess it did lie at the start of the video. You do need a spare, I think these are 40 mil bases that these go on. But yeah, so all you have to do is chop up the termagants wherever you want. You can kind of vary it up. Basically, you want to chop them kind of near the base where the carapace meets the tail. And then you are going to have to trim these little like terrain bits off of the tails. You can see where I've just trimmed it off and just scraped it off with a hobby knife. You can kind of cut the tails at an angle if you want to make it look like they're more like changing the angle of the dive. So, you can have some that are going straight down, some that are more at an angle. But yeah, I think it's effective enough. These are like a cheap little like throwaway unit anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And you can imagine once you put your basing materials and stuff on, that it'll look perfectly fine. You can even like shape the basing stuff that it really looks like they've just dove through the rubble or whatever. But yeah, so that was the first one. Super easy. Now on to number 2. And here we have number 2. And this one might be a bit surprising that I messed with it. This is, of course, the Neurotyrant, because it's actually a really cool model, and I talked a lot about how much I like it. I really do like it. There was just a couple little minor things. I kind of felt that the big bone crown thing was a little bit much when he already kind of has one built into his head crest. And also it was his mouth or his lack thereof. So basically how he was before, and this is super simple, and I'll have like the images from the artwork and the instructions popping up showing with all these things like where to cut and how all that went together. Basically he had like a top jaw with his top teeth, and then his bottom teeth were also facing down. So he didn't really have a mouth. He just had like 2 sets of teeth that like couldn't have bit together if he wanted to, and it's like, why? So super simple. All you do is you make two little cuts, and then basically you can just like snap that bottom jaw off, flip it around. You might need to trim it up a little bit, and then you can just glue it right back on. And then that gives him kind of like a scary, underbited, very much like a zoanthrope or the old neurothrope. And since we don't have neurothropes anymore, and we don't have the Malanthropes anymore, it kind of makes sense that this guy is like their spiritual successor. Also, when you take the crest off, it really like shows off his like nasty brain and stuff more. I don't know, I just like it. Basically, all you have to do is just shave off the two little connection spots on either side there, and you should be good to go. So that one's super simple, doesn't even need any green stuff, and away you go. Now on to number three. Now, number three is definitely one that I've seen more people talking about. Like when the new models came out, this was more of a discussion point. So I think everyone can agree the new wing Tyranid Prime does look very cool. It's a cool model, he's well made. We wish he had more weapon options than just the talons, but that's fine. The one thing was his wing placement. I don't think anybody didn't like the fact that he had wings, and even a lot of people like I think were okay with them being on the bottom. The problem is, and this was my main problem, is when these wings are on the bottom, like how they're supposed to be, it kind of ruins his silhouette. Even though I know it makes sense, like that he's like walking on them, it kind of ruins his silhouette in a way where it's like you can't even really see most of the model. Like it's blocking it, and then there's like no real good way to like take a picture or like show him. You need to like spin him around like this. So for that reason, and also just that, like, I thought that they made a little more sense to be up on top, because like when they're on top, then he can fight with his arms a little better. Like they can swing out of the way a little more when he's on the ground fighting, which is how he's posed. Um, so it's not quite as simple as just swapping them. So these arms can go in the bottom pretty easily. You don't need to do much trimming or anything to make them fit. Now the wings, though, what you're gonna have to do if you want them to be, if you're fine with them being forward, which it'll be the same, you'll be covering up a lot of the body and everything. If you want them to be back a little bit more like this, you will need to green stuff a little bit. You can make that easier by pinning it, like putting a pin and then green stuffing around it. I didn't feel I needed to. It was fine with glue. The only other thing you'll have to do is you have to actually trim away a little bit of his back carapace to make room for it. And so you want to just kind of go along the lines of the where the carapace, like where the different pieces meet, and just trim them back a little bit, just so that the wing is able to fold in behind a little easier. And so it's super easy. Again, all these kit bashes are pretty easy. We're getting into the harder ones now, but this is no more than half an hour's work, give or take. And I think it improves it quite a bit. It shows him off a lot better. I think like when he's like kind of like that, you can see a lot more of his body and stuff. And that was a big thing for me because he's a big cool model. I want him to be able to be seen a little better, even though apparently he sucks in games. So now on to the next two, and these they kind of have to be together. One of them I'm sure everybody's seen by now. Again, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think I might have even been the very first one or right in there, one of the first, because like I said, I had this planned out for a long time before this box even came out, guys. So I'm pretty excited to share it with you guys. That's why usually I don't do these kind of videos until the stuff's all painted and done, but with the more reveals coming soon, I thought it was an appropriate time. So here we have numbers 2 and number 1 of my little conversions from the Leviathan box set. So of course this is the Screamer Killer and the Psychophage. So I'm sure you've seen online, if you haven't seen mine in particular, the head swap of putting the Psychophage head onto the Screamer Killer. Now, basically, my thought process behind that, basically, it came down to the Screamer Killer at first. So, initial thoughts seeing these models, I had some big issues with this guy that I'll touch on afterwards. I'm just going to set him back because we're talking about this guy first. The Screamer Killer, I love. I love his pose. I love his arms, his bigger size. I was all good with that. My problem was with his head. For something that's meant to be just like vomiting out this plasma and screaming, his mouth was so small, and he's got this kind of humanoid looking head, kind of like gene stealers, which has never been my thing. I've always liked the more, crazy alien dinosaur looking heads that other Tyranids have. So it just didn't really fit and didn't really make sense. Um, but just taking the head from the Psychophage and sticking it on there, which is what a lot of people are doing, and it looks super cool. You've got the tentacles, and then you also have to think, so if you take the whole head from this and you put it on here, right? You're then left with nothing for this guy, right? So you've now basically just sacrificed a whole nother big model just to make one. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do this conversion in a way that I could still have both units and still have them to play with and use, um, while still improving, in my opinion, both of them. So what I did was I took the head off of that and put it on here. And I'll have it popping up like where I cut and what had to be trimmed off and whatnot. But basically it was cut right where the head and neck meets the body. So it's quite a big piece. So if I turn them to the side, my Screamer Killer now has quite a longer neck. Never mind my poor attempt at sculpting Tyranid carapace. It's my first time doing that. But so this all the way to here is part of the Psychophage underneath. And basically, you're left with this big gaping hole when you leave out the Screamer Killer head on the body here. So the neck piece from this actually is able to kind of slot in there enough anyway that I was able to glue it in, and then green stuff around it. So depending how much of the neck you want to use, I've seen people, cutting most of it off. I've seen people using the whole thing. It will depend how much probably of this that you have to sculpt, but you are going to have to do a fair bit, and you do have to kind of fill in underneath. You're probably going to have some gaps under there, but that's fine. So, like I said, so everybody's having to do this, the sculpting of the carapace. That's anybody that's using this head, they're going to have to do that. A lot of people, like I said, are leaving the tentacles on. So for two things that kind of bugs me, even though it looks super cool. I really, really like it. He has no rules to represent those. So it just kind of seems like a lot of extra stuff going on here that's not represented, which I know that's like the silliest of pet peeves. We all like to put extra stuff on our models, but I just like them to represent like what they're actually able to do. This guy chops with his claws and he screams. That's what he does. So what I did is you can kind of see like the muscle lines, I guess you would call it, like the starting of the tentacles, if you will. And you can basically cut it at those, and then you're gonna have to sit there and like trim it down with your knife and whatever, and you can get it to a point where it's like this, where you just have the one spike on the bottom, and then you just have to green stuff another spike on top. And basically what I'm going for kind of be like a Moloch mouth. If you can imagine, like when this guy's not fighting, this all kind of folds back up. And then when he's screaming and fighting, it all unfurls and opens up. And he's just barfing out plasma at people. And then the only other thing is that the holes for the Psychophage arms, you can either green stuff those in, or these extra little spikes I put on there were actually left over from the Neurotyrant's crown. So super easy there. I mean, it's super easy in concept, but it actually, like, unless you're used to green stuff sculpting, like, it is actually a fair amount of work. As we all know, I have green stuffed a lot of things, and this was still, like, quite a challenge for me and quite a lot of green stuff. And I quite literally ran out while I was doing it, so it looks a bit rough. I still need to tidy it up a little bit more, but I wanted to get this video made. So that is that guy. Now, on to his other, more complicated friend over here in the Psychophage. Now, when the box first came out and we first saw the contents, this was actually probably the model that I had the most problems with from the very start. And I guess I can kind of explain those here. So, the first things first is I hate the Tyranids where they have their butt way up in the air and then their head and their weapons way down low.
it's like they're waving their butt in the air, just like asking for it to be blown up. Like, why? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, if the butt end is going to be way up in the air, then that's where like the gun should be. Like a picture like on the Tyranofex, like that bothers me so much. Like, why is it way up there? You're just making yourself a way bigger target, way easier to be shot, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, there's nothing going on up there that it needs to be up higher. Like, it just, for something that's supposed to be perfectly adapted, it seems like a poor design in my opinion. So you've got this thing, right, where its butt's way up in the air so it's easier to be shot. Fine. Its mouth and everything is way down on the bottom, and it's supposed to be just like gobbling everything up. But yeah, it's got this big mouth going into a small neck and then a really big body. So it's like anything it eats is going to be like, and it's got to go upwards. So it's like eating things, and then it's got to like up into the air into its body. So like it doesn't really make sense that way either. And then okay, it's like supposed to be like kind of an all right like melee combatant that runs around trying to eat psychers and whatever. But yet its combat legs are in the back, and all of the weight from its body is being forced down on these little tiny front legs. So it just like it feels like if it lifted one of those up, it's just going to fall over like instantly from the weight being pushed down on the other little tiny legs. Like it just doesn't really make sense at all to me. And like it's weird because it's like it's a weird, cool, new, strange alien model, and it's got some cool aspects to it, and I'm sure lots of people love it. But for me, it just bothered me a lot. There was a lot of things about it that I'm just looking at. And I'm like, ugh, like it's not ticking the boxes for me. But I didn't want to just like scrap it for parts. Like I still want to have the model, and I think it has some like kind of cool rules in game. So again, so tying in with that guy, because I chose, unlike a lot of people, to cut the tentacles off, I now have the tentacles left over to use for this guy, and I have the head and face from the Screamer Killer. So that's what I have to work with to make this guy work, who is now missing his entire head and neck. Well, so I had the idea. So here's what the body looks like from the side. I'm like, well, what if like the whole front of this was the mouth? Like it has no neck. Everything it's gobbling up is just going straight into the body, fueling the smokestacks and whatever's up here, right? So that's what I started with. So when you cut off that neck, you have a big gaping hole here. And originally I was just going to stick tentacles in it. I was going to even take the tentacles from the little helper guys that the Neurotyrant has, since they don't really do anything, cram those in there to have even more, and have like no face really or anything. But then I was like, well, what if it was even like creepier and weirder? What if when it's just like walking around, all of the tentacles and everything fold back up inside, and it actually does have a face. It's got a little small face that looks pretty like innocent, and that is the face from the Screamer Killer. So you do have to literally cut the face off of the Screamer Killer. Well, actually, no, sorry. I think the whole face part I think is one piece. So the top and the bottom jaw is one piece. So you have that, and so imagine that like closed and all the tentacles in, and that's all you would see. And then it all opens up, the tentacles fly out, and it's crazy. But so what you have to do for that is, so you've got this big hole. You're gonna have to trim that up and tidy it up with your knife. And then you could do it first, you can do it after, but you could go along the edges with green stuff and just kind of like smooth it out, round it out before you start putting everything in it. But so you separate the top of the head from the bottom jaw, stick those at either end of the hole, and I even purposely put the bottom jaw like at a crazy, like it's like cockeyed, because it's just like just completely unhinged and flopped out of the way so that the tentacles can come out. So you glue those in place. You got to put a little bit of green stuff in behind the head. You can kind of see where I've gone around there. And again, like this all needs to be tidied up. This is literally my last scrap of green stuff doing this. Um, and then you're free. You might have to put a big ball of green stuff like in there, or some other supports. I think what I did actually is I took some of the extra sprues, cut them, stuck them into because it's all hollow, so you need something to like anchor the tentacles to. I think I stuck some extra sprues in there, with some super glue, and then stuck a blob of green stuff on them, and then just kind of stuck the tentacles into that, let that dry, and then stuck some more green stuff in there and kind of sculpted it around the tentacles a little bit. So that is the tongue and the two sets of tentacles from the Psychophage in there. So that's the head done. This was just like there were some gaps, so I was just filling some gaps and whatever. So that's fine. So that's your head done. Oh, these two little pieces on either side are also just like extra little bits. I think that's where like this plasma is supposed to come from the Screamer Killer. But I just added those into the bottom of the jaw there. So that was half the battle. Now, because you took the head and neck from the Psychophage, you are missing two of your joints, or not your joint, your two sets of your holes for the legs. But that's totally fine because of the way the carapace is. And I realize I'm not holding this very well. Okay, so the only holes for the legs you'll have left are back here. Do I have that right? No. The only holes you'll have left are up here. So the holes up here are meant to have. Which ones are these meant to have? Oh, these are meant to be here. Okay. No. So I had that mixed up. So these big legs are meant to be in these spots, but they're meant to be at a way different angle. They're meant to be like facing backwards. So that's why I had to green stuff to get them into that position where they're more forward. So this makes more sense to me. So now we've got the big combat-y legs up front so that he can fight. Whereas originally, you would have a whole front end here. So these legs were always here. This butt is way up in the air. And then all these little legs are way down here at the front. So this whole big back end is only supported by these. It makes no sense before the way it was before. But anyway, so these big combat, there is slots here, but they won't, like, if you were to just put them in the slots, they would be facing backwards, so it won't work. So you'll have to green stuff there. Then the medium sized set of legs I used for the back, and I left them rear facing. There's kind of these little, like a little natural, like notches in the armor where it kind of makes sense for them to go. And I just kind of green stuffed around them a little bit. And then the little bitty tiny arms, I just found nice little like recesses in the uh, like the musculature on the front where they looked good and natural, just kind of as just extra supports to help balance them out. Like it's a weird, awkward creature to begin with. I think that mine, compared to other Tyranids and stuff, makes significantly more sense compared to the original. And like I said, it's not perfect. There's definitely a little bit of like tidying up and stuff that needs to be done. But like as a design, I'm so much happier with this than the original piece, and I think it works a lot better. I see a lot of people like saying that they're going to turn this into like a Horspex. I think he's way too small for that. Like if I put this guy next to this guy, right? He's smaller than the Screamer Killer. Even if he had his proper head on, like this is the base he's on. Like he's not. I think a Horspex is like 16 wounds to his like 9 or 10. So the Horspex should be like significantly bigger than this guy, if anything, not the same size or smaller. So that didn't really make sense to me. But yeah, so that concludes my conversions. Ooh, got a loose leg. You have to work on that. That concludes my conversions for the Leviathan box set. Like I said, this was 5 easy things to do if you are wanting your set to maybe be a little more unique, or if with any of these models you were a little bit unhappy. I think everybody, especially new people, that should do what I did with the Rippers. Get yourself an extra unit of Rippers. And yeah, as always, guys, like and subscribe if you want to see more. Check out my Patreon if you want to see work in progress stuff. I post in there very regularly with all updates and stuff of what I'm working on and what's coming down the pipe before anywhere else. And don't forget to check out the channel sponsor, Lord of Skulls, that I shouted out at the start of the video. And that's all for today, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.